My mom said I was an embarrassment, so I bought the company she cleaned. For the night before I signed the acquisition papers, I stood in my childhood bedroom, holding the business card my mother had crumpled up and thrown at me 15 years ago. She'd called me worthless then, said I'd never amount to anything. Tomorrow I would own the company where she'd scrubbed floors for 2 decades, believing no one would ever know her last name. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, and stick around because this story proves that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. My name is Nora Castellanos. I am 34 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. But this story begins long, before I had the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, before I had the investment portfolio that made financial advisors stutter, and certainly before I had the power to change someone's life with a single phone call. This story begins in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in East Austin, where the air conditioning never worked quite right, and the walls were so thin you could hear Mrs. Chen's television through 3 layers of drywall. It begins with my mother, Carmen, coming home at 11:30 every night with bleach under her fingernails and defeat in her shoulders. Carmen Castellanos was 42 when I graduated high school, and she looked every day of it. 20 years of night shifts cleaning office buildings had carved lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She worked for a company called Meridian Commercial Services, one of those faceless corporate entities that contracted out janitorial work to office complexes downtown. I remember watching her get ready for work, the ritual of it, the polyester uniform that never quite fit right, the rubber gloves stuffed into her pocket, the way she'd check her reflection in the hallway mirror, and always, find something to criticize. "Mira, look at these hands," she'd say, holding up fingers that were permanently rough from chemicals. "This is what happens when you don't have choices, Nora. Remember that." But here's the thing about my mother. She didn't want me to have choices either. Not really. She wanted me to have just enough options to stay close, to remain manageable, to never grow beyond the boundaries of her own stunted dreams. When I told her I wanted to study computer science at UT, she laughed. Actually laughed. Computer science? Nora, be realistic. You're not good with numbers. You barely passed algebra. It was true. I had struggled with math in high school. But struggle isn't the same as inability, and I'd started to understand that my difficulties had more to do with confidence than capacity. When you grow up being told you're not smart enough, those words become a weight you carry everywhere. "I could get financial aid," I'd said. "There are programs for other people," Carmen interrupted. "People whose families have connections. We're not those people, mija. We're the people who clean their offices." The conversation ended there, as most of our conversations did, with Carmen's certainty that our place in the world was fixed, immutable, written in stone, and with my growing suspicion that maybe it wasn't. I enrolled at Austin Community College instead, studying general business while working part-time at a coffee shop near campus. It wasn't my dream, but it was a start. I told myself I could transfer later, could still find my way to the things I really wanted to learn. Carmen tolerated this plan. Community college was safe, local, cheap. It wouldn't give me ideas above my station, but even that limited ambition was too much for her when I mentioned wanting to transfer to UT after completing my associate degree. "Why can't you just be happy with what you have?" she'd asked one evening, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "You want to end up with a mountain of debt, studying things that won't get you a job? Look around, Nora. Look at where we live. This is reality." I looked around. At the apartment we'd shared for 8 years. At the furniture we'd bought secondhand and the television with a crack down the middle of the screen. At my mother's uniform, hanging on the back of her bedroom door like a daily reminder of limitation. "Maybe I want something different," I said quietly. That's when her expression changed, hardened. "Different? You think you're better than this? Better than me?" I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Carmen stood up, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. You know what your problem is, Nora. You think you're special. You think the rules don't apply to you. But let me tell you something. Dreaming doesn't pay rent. Dreaming doesn't put food on the table. And dreaming sure as hell doesn't change where you come from. The fight escalated from there. I don't remember every word, but I remember the feeling, like drowning in someone else's fear. Carmen's terror of risk, of change, of stepping outside the narrow confines of what she considered safe, was so complete that she couldn't see past it. And in her panic, she said things that would echo in my head for years. "You're embarrassing yourself," she'd shouted. "And you're embarrassing me. Walking around here like you're going to be somebody, like you're going to make something of yourself. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment, and I'm tired of watching it." I'd stared at her, feeling something break inside my chest. So what am I supposed to do? Just give up? You're supposed to be realistic. You're supposed to understand that people like us don't get to have everything we want. We work hard. We pay our bills. And we don't reach for things that aren't meant for us. And what if I try anyway? Carmen had looked at me with something that might have been pity. Then you'll fail. And you'll come crawling back here. And I'll have to watch you fall apart. And I don't have the energy for that, Nora. I really don't. The conversation ended with her going to her room and closing the door. I sat in the living room until 3 a.m, listening to the building settle around me and trying to understand how your own mother could be the biggest obstacle between you and your dreams. I transferred to UT that fall anyway. Carmen didn't speak to me for 2 weeks before I left for campus. She'd nod when I said good morning, grunt responses to direct questions, but the warm, complicated relationship we'd had, even with all its limitations, was gone. In its place was a cold disappointment that followed me everywhere. The night before I moved into the dorms, she finally broke her silence. "You're making a mistake," she said. We were standing in the kitchen, and she wouldn't look at me. "You're going to waste 4 years and come out with nothing but debt." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll know I tried." Trying isn't enough, Nora. Trying is what people do when they don't want to admit they can't do something. I left the next morning while she was getting ready for work. We hugged, awkward, brief, and she whispered, "Don't forget where you come from." But I think what she really meant was, don't forget your place. College was harder than I'd expected, but not in the ways Carmen had predicted. The coursework was challenging, yes, and money was constantly tight despite my financial aid and campus job. But the hardest part was the voice in my head that sounded exactly like my mother, questioning every decision, undermining every small success. When I got a B+ on my first computer programming assignment, that voice said, "Lucky break." When I was invited to join a study group, "They're just being nice." When a professor encouraged me to consider graduate school, "He doesn't know your background." It took me 3 years to realize that the voice wasn't protecting me. It was sabotaging me. By my senior year, I'd found my stride. I was working as a teaching assistant, had completed 2 internships, and was already fielding job offers from tech companies in Austin and beyond. I'd specialized in database management and business intelligence. "That's not going to last," she said quietly. "Those kinds of jobs, they come and go. They'll find a reason to let you go. And then what? You'll be right back where you started. Except now you'll have gotten used to money you don't really have." Felt something twist in my stomach. "Mom, I worked hard for this. I earned it." "I'm not saying you didn't work hard. I'm saying that work doesn't always mean what you think it means. These companies, they don't care about people like us. They'll use you up and throw you away." The drive home was quiet. Carmen turned on the radio to fill the silence, but I could feel her worry radiating across the car like heat. She was afraid for me. I understood that. But her fear was indistinguishable from sabotage, and I was tired of being asked to shrink myself to make her more comfortable. Pinnacle Systems was everything Carmen had feared, and nothing she'd predicted. The work was challenging and engaging. My colleagues were brilliant and supportive, and I was good at it, really good. Within 6 months, I was leading projects. Within a year, I was managing a small team. Within 2 years, I was being recruited by bigger companies offering bigger opportunities. I took a position with Data Flow Analytics in downtown Austin, a mid-size firm that specialized in helping companies make sense of their information ecosystems. My starting salary was $78,000 plus equity. Carmen's reaction was predictable. "They're going to expect more from you now," she warned. "More hours, more stress. And for what? A little more money that you'll just spend on. A more expensive apartment and fancier clothes?" "I like the work," I said. "I'm good at it. You're good at it now. But these jobs, they change. The requirements change. And when you can't keep up, why do you assume I won't be able to keep up?" Carmen looked at me with that same expression she'd worn at my graduation. Distant, worried, as if she was watching me walk toward a cliff. "Because I know how these things go, Nora. I've been cleaning the offices of people like this for 20 years. I've seen them come and go. The ones who think they're different, who think they're special. They all end up the same way. Which is how? Disappointed. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in South Austin, close enough to downtown that I could bike to work, but far enough away that the rent didn't eat my entire paycheck. It was the first place that was entirely mine. No roommates, no family, no history, but what I chose to make. Carmen visited once. She walked through the apartment slowly, touching surfaces like she was looking for dust, opening cabinets like she was conducting an inspection. "It's very nice," she said finally. But the way she said it made it sound like an accusation. "Thank you." "How much is the rent?" I told her. She winced. "That's more than I make in 2 months." "I know. It seems like a lot for one person. It's what I can afford." Carmen sat down on my new couch, the first piece of furniture I'd ever bought brand new, and looked around the living room. "Do you ever think about how many hours I work to pay for your college?" The question hit me like cold water. "Every day." "Do you?" "Yes, and I'm grateful." "Are you?" I sat down across from her, trying to understand what was happening. "Of course I am. Mom, why are you asking me this?" Carmen was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and hurt. "You never call anymore. You never visit. It's like you've forgotten where you came from." "I haven't forgotten anything. Haven't you?" "When's the last time you came home?" "I'm here now." "This isn't home, Nora. This is your apartment. Home is where I am, where we came from, the place you couldn't wait to leave." I felt the familiar weight of her disappointment settling over me, like fog. I left, because I wanted to build something for myself. That doesn't mean I'm ashamed of where I came from, doesn't it? The question hung between us, unanswered and unanswerable. How do you explain to someone that loving them doesn't mean accepting their limitations as your own? How do you tell your mother that her dreams were too small for you, without implying that she was too small for you? Carmen left that evening without resolving anything. Our relationship became a careful dance of phone calls and occasional dinners, conversations that stayed safely on the surface of things. She'd tell me about her work, her neighbors, the television shows she watched. I'd tell her carefully edited versions of my professional life, emphasizing the ordinary aspects and downplaying the successes. It was exhausting, this constant performance of being less than I was, but it seemed like the price of maintaining any relationship with her at all. At Dataflow, I was thriving. I'd been promoted twice and was now a senior analyst managing a team of 12 people. We worked with clients across Texas and the Southwest, helping them understand their data and make better business decisions. It was exactly the kind of work I'd dreamed of doing: complex, impactful, intellectually challenging. One of our biggest clients was a company called Meridian Commercial Services. The name meant nothing to me initially. It was just another account, another set of data to analyze and interpret. Meridian was a facilities management company that had grown rapidly over the past decade, acquiring smaller janitorial and maintenance companies throughout the region. They'd hired Dataflow to help them understand their operational efficiency and identify opportunities for cost reduction. I'd been working on the Meridian account for 3 months when I realized where I'd heard the name before. It was during a client meeting. I was presenting our preliminary findings to Meridian's executive team when their CFO mentioned something about their workforce demographics. "We employ about 4,000 people across Texas," he said. "Mostly hourly workers in janitorial and maintenance roles. High turnover, low margins. It's a challenging business model." Something clicked. That evening, I pulled out my phone and called Carmen. "Mom, what's the name of the company you works for? Why? Just curious. I realized I never remember the name. Meridian Commercial Services. Why are you asking?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "No reason. Just wanted to know." "Nora, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I have to go." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, where Meridian's organizational chart was still open. 4,000 employees, the CFO had said. Mostly hourly workers. High turnover. My mother was a line item in a cost reduction analysis. The revelation changed everything about how I approached the Meridian account. Suddenly, the spreadsheets weren't just numbers. They were people. Real people with real lives, real families, real struggles. People like Carmen, who'd been cleaning offices for 20 years and still worried about job security. I started digging deeper into Meridian's data, looking beyond the metrics my team had been asked to analyze. What I found was disturbing. Meridian had been systematically reduced. I spent the weekend building a comprehensive report that detailed Meridian's employment practices and their potential legal and ethical implications. On Monday morning, I presented it to my boss at Dataflow. "This is a problem," he said after reviewing my findings. "A big problem. What do we do?" "We have to tell them. Meridian is our client, and they have a right to know that their practices could expose them to litigation." "And then what?" "Then they decide how to respond. Probably by modifying their termination criteria. So nobody gets fired? Some people probably still get fired, but maybe not as many, and maybe not for the reasons we identified." It wasn't enough. I realized that exposing Meridian's practices to Meridian wouldn't solve anything. It would just make them more careful about their cruelty. That's when I started thinking about buying the company. It sounds absurd, I know. A 30-year-old analyst with a modest savings account and some stock options doesn't just buy a company worth $50 million. But I'd learned something important about business in my years at Dataflow. Most companies aren't worth what they appear to be worth, and most business problems are solvable if you have the right information and the right approach. Meridian was profitable, but barely. Their aggressive cost-cutting had alienated clients and demoralized employees. Their turnover rate was astronomical, which meant constant recruitment and training costs. Their reputation in the industry was poor, which limited their ability to win new contracts. But they had something valuable: contracts. Long-term, stable contracts with major commercial clients throughout Texas. If those contracts could be managed by a company that actually cared about employee retention and service quality, they could be extremely profitable. I started researching acquisition financing. I talked to business brokers. I consulted with lawyers who specialized in corporate transactions. What I learned was that buying a company like Meridian was possible, but it would require careful planning and substantial leverage. Over the next year, I made myself indispensable to the Meridian account. I learned everything about their operations, their client relationships, their financial structure. I also started building relationships with their key clients, positioning myself as the Dataflow analyst who really understood their business. When, 3 of Meridian's biggest clients started asking if I could work with them directly, bypassing Meridian's management team. I knew I had an opportunity. I left Dataflow to start my own consulting firm, taking the Meridian clients with me. It was a risky move, but it gave me the cash flow I needed to pursue the acquisition. More importantly, it gave me leverage. Meridian was about to lose 40% of their revenue to a consultant who understood their business better than they did. The acquisition negotiations took 8 months. I put together a consortium of investors, including 2 of Meridian's former clients who were interested in having a stake in their facilities management provider. We structured the deal as a management buyout, with me as the acquiring CEO and the investor group providing the majority of the financing. The day we signed the papers, I became the owner of the company where my mother had cleaned floors for 23 years. I didn't tell her immediately. I wanted to get my feet under me first, to understand the company from the inside before I revealed my connection to it. I spent my first month as CEO reviewing personnel files, meeting with managers, and talking to employees. Carmen's file made for depressing reading. 23 years of employment with minimal wage increases, no promotions, and a performance review system that seemed designed to keep employees insecure rather than help them improve. Her most recent review included a note that she was resistant to change and set in her ways, code words that I now recognized as preparation for termination. I called her supervisor, a man named Derek, who managed the night shift crews for downtown Austin. Carmen Castellanos, he said when I asked about her. Yeah, she's been around forever. Good worker, I guess, but she's expensive. Union wages, full benefits. Honestly, we could replace her with 2 part-time people for what she costs. What's her work quality like? Fine. No complaints from the clients. But fine isn't good enough anymore, you know? We need people who can do more, who can adapt to new procedures. Carmen does things the way she's always done them. Have you talked to her about adapting? Derek laughed. Lady, have you ever tried to teach an old dog new tricks? Some people just can't change. I hung up feeling sick to my stomach. This was how they talked about her, about all the long-term employees, as problems to be solved, obstacles to be removed, old dogs who couldn't learn new tricks. That evening, I drove to the office building where Carmen worked. I'd never seen her at work before, had never really understood what her job entailed beyond the broad description of cleaning offices. I badged into the building using my new executive access and took the elevator to the 17th floor, where I knew her crew was scheduled to work that night. I found her in a conference room, methodically, wiping down a table that seated 20 people. She was wearing the same polyester uniform I remembered from my childhood, her hair pulled back in the same practical bun. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. She didn't see me at first. I stood in the doorway and watched her work. Careful, thorough, taking pride in doing the job right even though no one would notice or care. She cleaned each chair, straightened the papers left scattered on the table, emptied the wastebaskets, and vacuumed around the perimeter of the room. It was then that I realized I'd never seen my mother take pride in anything the way she took pride in her work. At home, she was tired, defeated, overwhelmed by everything she couldn't control. But here, in this anonymous conference room at 11 o'clock at night, she was competent and careful and dignified. Mom. She turned around, startled. For a moment, she didn't recognize me. I was wearing a business suit and probably looked as out of place as I felt. Nora? What are you doing here? I wanted to see where you work. Carmen looked around the conference room as if seeing it for the first time. How did you get in? This building has security. I know someone who works here. She nodded, accepting this explanation. You shouldn't be here. I could get in trouble if they think I'm entertaining visitors. You won't get in trouble. How do you know? I looked at my mother, really looked at her, at the lines around her eyes and the way her shoulders curved inward from years of bending over desks and tables, at her hands, which were still rough from chemicals despite the rubber gloves, at the uniform that had never fit quite right and never would. Because I own the company, Carmen laughed, but there was no humor in it. All the employees. Right. How many of the other employees are your mother? I didn't answer, because we both knew the answer. You've ruined everything, Carmen said again. 23 years I've worked here. 23 years of being just another employee, just another person doing her job. And now everyone will know that I'm different, special, the boss's mother. What's wrong with being special? Everything. The word exploded out of her. Everything is wrong with it. I never wanted to be special. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to do my job and earn my paycheck and know that I deserved what I had. You do deserve what you have. Do I? Because now I'll never know, will I? Now every paycheck I get, every day, I'm not fired. Every benefit I receive, I'll know it's because my daughter owns the company. I'll know I'm getting charity. I stared at her, finally beginning to understand. Carmen didn't want to be saved. She didn't want opportunities or security or protection from arbitrary termination. She wanted to be ordinary. She wanted her struggles to be her own, her successes to be earned, her failures to be deserved. And I had taken that away from her. I was trying to help. I said quietly. I know you were. But you should have asked me first. Would you have said yes? Carmen looked at me with something that might have been pity. No. I would have said no. She gathered up her cleaning supplies and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. I'm proud of you, she said. I want you to know that. I'm proud that you're successful, that you built something for yourself. But this, buying this company, this wasn't for me. This was for you, to make yourself feel better about the choices you made. That's not true, isn't it? You've been carrying guilt about leaving me behind, about having more than I do. And now you found a way to fix it. Except you can't fix it, Nora. You can't go back and make different choices. You can't save me from my own life. She left then, and I stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the 20 chairs she'd cleaned so carefully. I understood, finally, what I'd done wrong. I'd tried to rescue my mother from a life she'd never asked to be rescued from. I'd assumed that her limitations were prisons rather than choices. And in trying to give her what I thought she needed, I'd taken away the thing she valued most. Her independence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, staring out the window at the Austin skyline and trying to figure out what to do next. I could sell the company, but that would just create more chaos for the employees. I could step down as CEO, but that would mean abandoning the improvements I'd planned to make. Or I could find a way to make this work for everyone, including Carmen. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting for the night shift employees. I'd never addressed the entire workforce before, and I could see the anxiety on their faces as they filed into the break room at Meridian's Austin facility. I know there have been rumors about changes coming to the company, I began, and I want to address those directly. It's true that Meridian has new ownership. I'm the new CEO, and I have some specific plans for how we're going to operate going forward. I paused, looking around the room at faces that ranged from skeptical to worried to hopeful. First, there will be no layoffs based on seniority or cost considerations. If someone is terminated, it will be for performance reasons only, and there will be a clear improvement plan before any termination decisions are made. Second, we're implementing a profit-sharing program. Everyone who's been with the company for more than 2 years will receive quarterly bonuses based on our overall performance. Third, we're expanding our training programs and creating clear pathways for advancement within the company. No one should feel stuck in the same position for 20 years if they want to grow. I could see Carmen in the back of the room, her face carefully neutral. Finally, I want to address something directly. My mother, Carmen Castellanos, works for this company. She has worked here for 23 years, and she has earned her position through her own efforts. She will not receive any special treatment because of our relationship. She will not be asked to do anything differently because of our relationship. And anyone who treats her differently because of our relationship will answer to me personally. After the meeting, Carmen approached me. Was that supposed to make me feel better? She asked. It was supposed to make it clear that you earned your place here. And what about you? Did you earn your place here? The question stung because it was fair. I earned the money to buy the company. Whether I can earn the right to run it remains to be seen. Carmen studied my face for a long moment. You really think you can make this work? I think I can make it better than it was. And what if you can't? What if you fail? Then I'll fail, but at least I'll have tried. Carmen almost smiled. Trying isn't enough, remember? That's what I told you once. You were wrong about that. Maybe. Or maybe we're both going to find out together. Running Meridian turned out to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. Not because the work was complex. I understood the business model and had good instincts for operational improvements. It was hard because every decision I made affected real people's lives, and many of those people had been invisible to previous management. I spent my first 6 months as CEO learning names, understanding individual circumstances, and trying to rebuild a culture that had been systematically destroyed by years of cost-cutting and employee demoralization. The profit-sharing program was popular but expensive. The training programs took time to show results. The pathway for advancement meant hiring managers from outside the company, which created resentment among some long-term employees who felt passed over. But slowly, things began to improve. Our turnover rate dropped. Our client satisfaction scores increased. Our workforce became more stable and more engaged. Carmen and I developed a new relationship, professional during work hours, carefully personal during our monthly dinners. She never asked for special treatment, and I never offered it. But I could see her taking pride in the changes at Meridian, even if she couldn't quite admit that her daughter had made them possible. One evening, about a year after I'd bought the company, Carmen called me at home. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I've been thinking about what you said that night in the conference room, about trying not being enough." "Okay. I was wrong about that. And I was wrong about other things too." I waited, not wanting to interrupt. I was so afraid of failing that I forgot how to want things, real things, big things. And I was so afraid of you failing that I tried to make you afraid too. "Mom, let me finish. You were right to leave. You were right to go to college, to take risks, to build something for yourself. And you were right to buy this company, even if you did it for the wrong reasons." "What were the wrong reasons?" Carmen was quiet for a moment. "You did it because you felt guilty, because you thought you'd left me behind. But you didn't leave me behind, Nora. I chose to stay behind. There's a difference. I don't understand. I could have supported your dreams without sharing them. I could have been proud of your success without feeling threatened by it. I chose to make your achievements about my limitations instead of celebrating them for what they were." I felt tears starting to form. "You were trying to protect me. I was trying to protect myself from feeling like I'd wasted." 2 years later, Carmen was promoted to night shift supervisor for the downtown Austin region. She managed a team of 40 people and had responsibility for 12 office buildings. She took pride in the work in a way I'd never seen before, not just pride in doing the job well, but pride in leading others, in solving problems, in being trusted with responsibility. We had dinner every week now, and our conversations were different. We talked about her team, about the challenges of management, about the business decisions I was making at the corporate level. We talked about my dating life and her attempts to learn Spanish again, and the book she was reading. Most importantly, we talked about the future, both hers and mine, as something expansive and full of possibility. On the 3-year anniversary of my acquisition of Meridian, I was featured in Austin Business Journal as one of the 40 under 40 business leaders to watch. The article focused on how I'd transformed a struggling facilities management company into a model employer. But what struck me most was a quote they'd included from one of our employees. "This company actually cares about us now," Carmen Castellanos, night shift supervisor, had told the reporter. "Management listens when we have ideas, invests in our training, and treats us like professionals. It makes all the difference in the world." Reading my mother's words in print, seeing her describe herself as a professional, seeing her speak with authority about management and workplace culture, I realized that my revenge had never really been about proving Carmen wrong. It had been about proving that we were both capable of more than we'd believed. The real revenge wasn't buying the company where she cleaned floors. It was creating a place where she could flourish, where her 2 decades of experience and wisdom were valued, where her natural leadership abilities could finally be recognized and rewarded. But perhaps more importantly, it was discovering that my mother's limitations had never been about lack of ability. They'd been about lack of opportunity and lack of belief in her own potential. Once those barriers were removed, she transformed herself in ways that surprised us both. The company continued to grow. We expanded into facilities management for healthcare systems and educational institutions. We developed proprietary software for scheduling and quality control. We became known throughout Texas as an employer of choice in an industry notorious for high turnover and poor working conditions. Carmen thrived in her leadership role. She implemented new training programs, reduced turnover in her region by 60%, and became the go-to supervisor for handling difficult client relationships. Watching her command respect from building managers and corporate executives, people who had once barely acknowledged her existence, was perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the entire experience. But the most meaningful change was in our relationship. The careful distance we'd maintained for so many years dissolved completely. Carmen became one of my most trusted advisors, offering insights about employee morale and operational efficiency that no MBA program could have taught me. Our monthly dinners became weekly strategy sessions, and our conversations became the foundation for many of the policy changes that made Meridian successful. 5 years after the acquisition, we opened our second office in San Antonio. Carmen led the transition team, training the new supervisors and establishing the culture that had made our Austin operation so successful. Watching her present to the San Antonio management team, confident, knowledgeable, completely at ease, in her authority, I was struck by how much we'd both changed. After the presentation, we drove back to Austin together. It was late, and the highway was mostly empty except for long-haul truckers and the occasional late commuter. "Can I ask you something?" Carmen said, as we passed the outlet malls outside San Marcos. "Of course." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't bought the company? If you'd just let things play out the way they were going?" I thought about it. "Sometimes. Do you?" "All the time." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "I think I would have been fired within 6 months. Derek had already started documenting everything I did wrong, building a case. I probably would have found another job eventually, but it would have been the same thing. Minimum wage, no benefits, no respect. And now I'm making more money than I ever thought possible. I have a team that looks up to me. I have skills I didn't know I could develop." She paused. "And I have a daughter who sees me as an equal instead of someone to be rescued." That last observation hit me harder than I'd expected. "Is that how you felt? Like I was trying to rescue you?" "At first, yes. But I understand now that it wasn't about rescue. It was about opportunity. You didn't save me from my life. You gave me the tools to build a better one." We drove in comfortable silence for a while, watching the Austin skyline appear in the distance. The city had grown so much since I'd moved there for college, transformed from a quirky college town into a major metropolitan area. Sometimes I felt like Carmen and I had grown alongside it, evolving from who we'd been into who we were capable of becoming. There's something I've never told you, Carmen said as we pulled into her neighborhood. What's that? The night before you left for UT, I stood in your room after you'd gone to sleep. I looked at your suitcases and your textbooks and the acceptance letter you'd pinned to your bulletin board, and I was terrified. Terrified of what? That you were going to succeed, that you were going to become someone I couldn't relate to anymore, that you were going to outgrow me completely. I pulled into her driveway and turned off the engine. And did I? Carmen smiled. No, you grew into yourself. There's a difference. What's the difference? Outgrowing someone means leaving them behind. Growing into yourself means becoming who you were always meant to be, even if other people can't see it at first. She got out of the car but leaned back down to the passenger window. Thank you, mija. For what? For seeing who I could become before I could see it myself. The next morning, I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on the door. There's someone here to see you, she said. She says she's Carmen's daughter? I looked up, confused. Carmen's daughter? You mean Carmen's granddaughter? No, she definitely said daughter. She's about your age. I followed my assistant to the reception area, where I found a woman who looked remarkably like Carmen. The same dark eyes, the same careful posture, the same expression of cautious determination. I'm Isabella Castellanos, she said, extending her hand. Carmen is my mother, too. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm sorry, what? I think we need to talk. We went to my office, where Isabella explained that she was Carmen's daughter, from a relationship she'd had when I was in college. Carmen had kept Isabella's existence secret, supporting her through community college and nursing school while maintaining the fiction that I was her only child. Why? I asked, still reeling from the revelation. Why didn't she tell me about you? Isabella looked uncomfortable. Because you were her success story. The daughter who made it out, who went to college, who built something. I was more complicated. Complicated how? I got pregnant at 17, dropped out of high school, made a lot of bad choices. Mom supported me through all of it, but she didn't want you to know. She said you had enough to worry about with your own life. I stared at Isabella, trying to process this information. Carmen had had another daughter. She'd been supporting two of us, working night shifts and paying for community college and nursing school and keeping it all secret. Are you telling me this because you need something? I asked. Isabella shook her head. I'm telling you because Mom is retiring next month, and she wants to tell you herself. But she's scared you'll be angry that she kept this from you. Why would I be angry? Because it changes everything, doesn't it? All those years you thought she was sacrificing everything for your education, she was actually splitting her resources between two daughters. All those times she said she couldn't afford to dream big, she was actually putting me through nursing, school. I thought about this. Where do you work now? Dell Children's Hospital. I'm a pediatric nurse. I've been there for 3 years. And you're happy? Isabella smiled, Carmen's smile. I love what I do. I'm good at it. And I have a 10-year-old son who thinks I'm the smartest person in the world. Carmen has a grandson. His name is Miguel. He wants to be an engineer when he grows up. I laughed, suddenly understanding so much more about my mother's life than I'd ever known. She's been managing 3 generations of dreams, hasn't she? That's one way to put it. That evening, I went to Carmen's apartment, the same apartment we'd shared when I was in high school, though she'd redecorated it completely over the years. Isabella was there with Miguel, a serious 10-year-old who was working on math homework at the kitchen table. You told her, Carmen said to Isabella, and there was resignation in her voice. She had a right to know. Carmen looked at me anxiously. Are you angry? I'm not angry. I'm impressed. Impressed? You raised 2 daughters, supported us both through school, and managed to give us both the foundation we needed to build good lives. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. Carmen sat down heavily at the kitchen table next to Miguel. I wanted to tell you so many times, but it felt like too much to explain. How I'd had another relationship, how I'd made different choices, how I was managing everything without asking for help. You were protecting both of us, I said. Isabella from feeling like she was less important, and me from feeling obligated to help with expenses I couldn't afford. Maybe. Or maybe I was just afraid you'd think less of me. I looked around the apartment, at Isabella helping Miguel with his homework, at Carmen's nursing textbook stacked on the counter. She'd been taking classes to become a certified trainer, at the family photos that now made more sense. Mom, I could never think less of you. If anything, knowing this makes me think more of you. You've been carrying so much more than I ever realized. Miguel looked up from his homework. Are you my Aunt Nora? I guess I am. Mom says you bought the company where Abuela works. That's right. Why? I looked at Carmen, then at Isabella, then back at Miguel. Because I wanted to make sure good people get treated the way they deserve to be treated. Miguel nodded solemnly. That's what Mom does at the hospital. Exactly. 6 months later, Carmen officially retired from Meridian with a pension that would allow her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Her replacement was someone she'd trained personally, and the transition was seamless. At her retirement party, she gave a speech that brought everyone to tears. When I started working for this company 26 years ago, she said, I thought I knew what I was capable of. I thought I knew my place in the world, and I thought that place was small and fixed and permanent. What I learned, especially in the last few years, is that we're all capable of more than we know. We're all worthy of more than we settle for. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone believes in us enough to help us see it. She looked at me across the crowded break room. Thank you for seeing me before I could see myself. The applause was thunderous, and I realized that this moment, watching my mother receive recognition for the leader she'd become, was worth more to me than any business success I'd ever achieved. After the party, the 4 of us, Carmen, Isabella, Miguel and I went out for dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. Miguel was fascinated by the city lights, and Isabella was telling us about her plans to become a nurse practitioner. Carmen was quiet, taking it all in. What are you thinking about? I asked her. I'm thinking about that fight we had when you wanted to transfer to UT, she said. When I told you that people like us don't get to have everything we want. What about it? Carmen smiled. I was wrong. People like us get to have everything we're willing to work for. The difference is knowing that we deserve it. As we walked back to the parking garage, Miguel slipped his hand into mine. Aunt Nora, when I grow up, will you help me buy a company too? I laughed. Miguel, when you grow up, you're going to be smart enough and capable enough to build your own company. Will you help me anyway? I looked at Carmen, at Isabella, at this little boy who carried all of our dreams forward into the next generation. Of course I will. 7 years have passed since I bought Meridian Commercial Services. The company now employs over 8,000 people across 3 states. We've been recognized as one of the best employers in Texas 4 years running. Our profit-sharing program has made millionaires out of longtime employees who never thought they'd own anything more valuable than their work uniforms. But the real measure of success isn't in the financial reports or the industry awards. It's in the individual stories of transformation. The night janitor who became a facility manager, the part-time cleaner who finished her degree and moved into administration, the maintenance worker who started his own contractor business with a loan from our employee development fund. It's in watching Carmen volunteer as a mentor for the company's career development program, helping other long-term employees see possibilities they'd never considered. It's in seeing Isabella pursue her master's degree in nursing while raising Miguel and maintaining her position at the hospital. It's in Miguel's straight A report cards, and his science fair projects, and his absolute certainty that he can become anything he wants to be. Most of all, it's in the knowledge that revenge, when done right, isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. It's about taking the systems that limit people and rebuilding them to help people flourish. It's about proving that the American dream isn't dead. It's just been hoarded by people who forgot that lifting others up doesn't require pushing anyone down. My mother said I was an embarrassment, that I was reaching for things that weren't meant for people like us. She was wrong about the reaching, but she was right about one thing. I wasn't like her. Not the her she'd allowed herself to be, but she wasn't like that version of herself either. None of us are limited to the smallest version of ourselves. The version that's afraid to dream, afraid to risk, afraid to believe that we deserve more than we've been given. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to accept other people's limitations as your own. Sometimes it's building something so beautiful and inclusive and transformative that the people who tried to keep you small have no choice but to grow alongside you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, your revenge becomes everyone's redemption. I hope this story resonates with anyone who's ever been told they were reaching too high, dreaming too big, or forgetting their place. Share your own story of proving the doubters wrong in the comments below. I'd love to feature some of your experiences in future videos on revenge treats. Sometimes the best way to honor our struggles is to celebrate how far we've come, and to remember that our success doesn't diminish anyone else's worth. It expands what's possible for everyone.